Hello and welcome to Stratford-upon-Avon, home of William Shakespeare and the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. We've been here in Stratford since 1847, when the birthplace itself came up for sale and a committee of people gathered together to raise the funds to save it for the nation. Hello, my name's Paul Taylor, Collections Manager here at Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, and I have the enormous privilege of looking after our museum, library and archive collections. We've been collecting since 1847. In 1862 we took on responsibility for the local archives of Stratford-upon-Avon, and then in 1879 the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre, the predecessor of the Royal Shakespeare Company, started, and they began collecting material relating to Shakespeare and performance. In 1964 the now Royal Shakespeare Company collections came together with the collections of the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust to form a single collection of material here in Stratford that we've looked after ever since. And the items we're going to show you today illustrate the breadth of that collection as a whole. First of all, a document from 1378, which is in one of our local collections. It's much earlier than much of the material people think we have, and it relates to an incident that's nothing to do with Stratford but does have an interesting Shakespeare connection. It's the knighting of the eldest son of John, Duke of Lancaster. As we know from the plays and from history itself, he later becomes Henry IV, and it's a really interesting early surviving document. We also have a range of material that relates to knowledge in Shakespeare's time, some of which are direct source books for the plays itself, and one of those we have here is a copy of Holinshed's Chronicles, used as a source for many of the history plays. We also have an early map of the Americas, which shows how the knowledge that the people of Shakespeare's time was developing and growing, and it's really interesting how accurate it is around the coastlines. The interior gets much more sketchy, but it gives us a sense that the world was becoming a smaller place, and a lot of that is then reflected back in Shakespeare's plays itself. As you might expect, we also have editions of Shakespeare's plays. We've got an early copy of King Lear here today, which illustrates the quarto editions. These are the smaller format, cheaper editions that were published in Shakespeare's lifetime or shortly thereafter. Here at the Birthplace Trust we're very fortunate to look after 31 of the 79 Shakespeare documents, and these are the only surviving handwritten documents from Shakespeare's time that mention him directly by name. One of those is the Quiney letter, which we have here today. This was the only known letter written to Shakespeare in his lifetime that survives, and it's a letter from Richard Quiney, a man of Stratford, on behalf of the town, asking for a loan to assist Stratford with a period of hardship. It's indicating to us that Shakespeare's clearly very wealthy, very well known, a man you can go to for help back here in Stratford. We know that Richard Quiney met Shakespeare down in London around the same time as this letter was written, so that perhaps explains why it was never delivered and has survived to be in our collections today. One of the most important items in our collection is this first folio of Shakespeare's plays. This was published in 1623, 7 years after Shakespeare had died, and was put together by members of his acting company. It's important to us for a number of reasons. It's the first time that a single author's plays were collated in this way, but most importantly, without it, 18 of Shakespeare's plays would be lost to us as they didn't appear in print in any other form prior to the first folio. New, this book would have cost you £1, which might not sound very much, but if you think that the school teacher in Stratford at that time got paid £20 for an annual salary, it sort of puts the price of the book in context and shows what a valuable item it would have been. So the collections of the Birthplace Trust have grown over many years, and they come to us in many different ways, whether they're gifts, whether they're purchases or items that come in on loan. And another selection of material from the collections here takes us beyond Shakespeare's life itself. So the first edition of the plays after the folios was by a chap called Nicholas Rowe, and we have one of those books out here today. And this book's really interesting because it also includes the first biography of Shakespeare, and it's where stories such as the Deer Poaching at Charlcote appear in print for the first time, and shows in 1709, when the book was published, there's already that interest in Shakespeare the man, as well as Shakespeare's works itself. Moving forward through time, in 1879, Stratford gets its own permanent theatre built for the first time, with the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre constructed, where the Royal Shakespeare Theatre is still today. And we have the first season playbill, the poster that shows what they were doing. And it's really interesting for us to look at this material to see that they're not doing one play over the season, they're doing a different play every night. So Much Ado, then Hamlet, then there's a concert, Hamlet again, The Tempest, Much Ado again, Hamlet, and then finishing off with As You Like It. So there's a lot of activity going on in that very first season. We also have different editions of the plays through time, whether they're adaptations or variants on the play. So we have a copy here of Love in the Forest from the 18th century, which is a sort of a different version of As You Like It, with bits added and subtracted. We've got editions in foreign languages. So this is a Thai edition of one of the plays. We've here at the Birthplace Trust look after over 80 different languages for Shakespeare's plays, showing that global reach. One of the most interesting translations is a modern one, and that's Hamlet translated into Klingon. Now, following the production of the film Star Trek VI, there was a throwaway line about not having experienced Shakespeare unless you've experienced it in the original Klingon, and then this edition was published shortly afterwards. And it's really interesting to show that the intergalactic reach of Shakespeare, if you like. We also have illustrated editions, and this is one that was produced in 1953 by the Folio Society, and is a production of As You Like It, introduced by director Peter Brook, with illustrations for the costumes by Salvador Dali. So it's really interesting to see those different approaches taken to the staging of Shakespeare. Finally, we also have extensive museum collections. Now, a lot of those collections are out on display in the 5 properties we look after here in Stratford. We've got a few examples here to show you the breadth, if you like, of what we have. First of all, we have this chair, which was produced in 1769 as part of the Shakespeare Jubilee, which took place here in Stratford. And it's the chair that David Garrick sat on while he was presiding over the events of that Jubilee. It was the first significant Shakespeare celebration that took place here in the town, and really has led to the growth of the interest in Stratford as a tourist destination ever since. So it's a really fine surviving piece. We have 2 smaller items as well that date from the 19th century. One is a tankard, very reminiscent of the sort of tankard that would have been used in Shakespeare's time, and also is referenced in several of the plays. It's interesting today to pair it with this porcelain figure of Falstaff. Obviously Falstaff, taverns, drinking go together very well, so it's nice to be able to show the 2 together. And they show the range not only of material culture items that relate to Shakespeare, but also souvenir ware that starts to be produced, not just of Shakespeare himself, but of material related to the characters and the plays. And on the wall we've got 2 interesting portraits. One's a portrait of Shakespeare, known as the Dunford portrait, which appeared for the first time at the start of the 19th century. And then just below it is again a 19th century oil painting by Thomas Stoddart, showing a scene from As You Like It, in the Forest of Arden it's called. And it's an interesting one where you can sort of see how depictions of the plays are changing over time. So hopefully this brief run through of our collections gives you an idea of the sort of material that we look after here.
Hello and welcome to the reading room of the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. I'm Madeline Cox. I look after the public service at the Library and Archive. This reading room, although it's small, we actually welcome up to 3,000 people every year who come and do research here. From primary school children who are perhaps having their first encounter with Shakespeare, to people who are academics, theatre professionals, and also with our local collections, family historians and people researching the history of their home. We also get around 150 inquiries a month from around the world and do a lot of copying. Because some people aren't able to visit in person, we're able to send copies of our materials by post, and that's very popular. We also welcome groups and do treasures displays for them, which is a great opportunity for people to see things like the Shakespeare documents, early printed books, things that perhaps they'd normally only see in the glass case of an exhibition. Within the department, we're also responsible for exhibitions in our treasures room and in all of the properties. And we're also very active on social media, so I've got my own Tales from the Reading Room, and we've got various other blog series that are going, and we do quite a lot on Twitter and Facebook, so have a look at those.